In this tutorial, I'm going to show how to create both global presets and master controls for controlling parts of your system or the entire system, both globally and individually. If you've been following along with the previous tutorials, you'll know that we built a configuration file that consisted of a diagram configuration that had two analog inputs as source material coming from a CD player going through a gain block. The output of the gain block, the left channel went to two channels of a local amplifier connected to data port outputs. The right channel went out as a CobraNet feed to a separate CobraNet bundle. That bundle went out as bundle 1000 as 16-bit resolution on one channel of that bundle. On the receiving configuration, the second basis unit, it will receive that bundle right here. That bundle is going to come in as bundle 1000, and when it comes in, we're going to call it right background music. It then comes into the configuration file, thusly, and we just immediately sent it right out to the two local amp channels that we were going to use for that particular design. Real simple design. Two basis units passing CobraNet audio from the first unit, which I'm calling left rack, that has the CD source in it, and my slave rack, which is the right rack, is going to receive that CobraNet signal and pass it over. What we did also was we made some simple snapshots, in this case, that controlled the amp panels. The slave unit has only two snapshots, amps on and amp off. So when I go to amp off, it affects the amp power buttons, which actually puts them in a standby, but for all practical purposes we can call it amp off. And when I choose amp on, then indeed it turns on those amplifier panel, those buttons. Same thing is true for the left rack. I have exactly the same type of controls, amps left on, left amps on and left amps off, and just to call it a different thing. In addition, I have some other snapshots that we created that will affect not the amp button, but instead will drive the DSP block, in this case the gain block, to its different levels that we've stored. For full up, I set it as unity gain 0 dB. I have a minus 10 dB setting, which takes it down to 10 dB, of course, and then minus 20 dB, which does the same thing, and then back to full up. So I have two different types of snapshots in this particular config file. So what we're going to do right now is make a global preset that will affect all of the amp being turned on or off by firing off different snapshots. So I'm going to go to my global preset window over here on the right side, and earlier I had just minimized it to the side by using this little icon right here, this little auto hide icon. I'm going to go ahead and paste it or stick it down so it stays in place, just so we don't constantly have it sliding away and back into view. So I'm on Global Presets tab. If by chance you had accidentally clicked on the archive folder, you could go back to the Global Presets tab and also into the masters when we get to that. But let's go to Global Presets. Let's create our first global preset. So I right-clicked on the word Global Preset and launched this little menu. New Global Preset, and a new wizard should open up. And that wizard is a window to tell me we're going to create a new global preset. In this case, I'm going to call it All Amps On. And if I want to put some notes in there, I certainly can. And in this case, All Amps On is actually going to talk to both basis units. It's going to we have to make sure that it launches into the correct config file that we want it to be. It just by default happens to be in the config that it's currently in. And we're going to fire off a particular snapshot for each config. When it's in the CD source, we're going to fire off left amps on, and when it talks to the right rack and goes into the slave config, we're going to go to all amps on for that one, or amps on. You can see that it's firing off two different snapshots. That's okay. It's one global preset. Now, the next page says, hey, you don't have any masters created. If you want to create some masters and make the masters go to a certain level or a certain control value, you can certainly do so. The help file will explain this further. If I get a chance, I'll show you how this would actually look if we had masters created. We don't have masters created at this point, so I'll just click next. And in fact, we're now creating a global preset called All Amps On. It will have a unique number when I actually create it or hit the finish button. And then this global preset will apply to 2 devices out of my system. It might only apply to 1 device. So let me click finish. And we can see now that I have 1 global preset. I'm going to make another global preset just to show you that a global preset doesn't have to talk to every device in the system. It might only talk to 1 device. This one is going to be, I'm going to call this one full volume. And this one, I'm only going to talk to the left rack. And I'm going to fire off the snapshot that is full up. Basically, ignore whatever's going on in the right rack. Just only talk to the left rack in this case. And again, I don't have any master preset, or excuse me, master controls. So I'm not going to fire off any masters for this example. And I'll finish that one. And we'll go ahead and make 3 more global presets real fast. This one's going to be mid-level, I'm going to call it. And that's going to fire off my minus 10 dB setting in the left rack. And finally, I'll make 1 more global preset. And I'll call this one lowest setting. How about lowest level? And that one is going to fire off again just the left rack, and we are going to go to the minus 20 dB setting of the snapshot. Next, again, no masters, and then finish this one out. Now, rather than call that full volume, I might make that be loud, medium, and soft. I can certainly relabel these. Just go edit and call this one loud, and then just click next, 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 finish. You know, I wasn't changing anything else. I could also edit, of course, the assignments, but there you see the name has changed. I'll edit this one as well. Mid-level doesn't mean anything, but how about medium? And it's still talking to the left rack and no masters, and we finish this one out. And I'll just leave the last one there. You understand how that goes. Now let me make, before I make 1 more global preset to turn all amps off, I have one called all amps on. I'm also going to show you what would have happened if we had had a master preset, a master level control. Masters don't have to be just level controls. Masters can be any sort of variable control. So it could be EQ settings, it could be delay settings, it could be gain settings, and so on. The only requirement is that the settings have to all be the same. In other words, I can't have a master level that controls EQ of one box but gain of another box, or delay of one box and filter settings of another box. That wouldn't make any sense. So the way we make a master is exactly the same way we make global presets. I'll go to the Masters tab, right click on the word Masters, make a new master. I'm going to call this one All Amp Channels. Or let's make it all speakers. Let's call it all speakers because it's going to be all speaker levels. And I'll say OK to this one. And in this case, if you double click on it, it didn't actually run the wizard right away because all amp levels actually brings up a new window. where I can put slave controls. Now let me go ahead and get this back to normal view. Let me go back to resetting all tool windows for a moment. The reason being is I want to get all my tabs visible, and I'm going to close these out for a moment. And I wanted to show this whole window open at one time, and now I'll just bring up the other control and I can go to the outputs of that one. So what I'm going to do right now is we'll go back and forth between the slave data port out and the CD source data port out. You'll see the same effect. On my all levels, what I'm going to do is paste slave channels in there for this master control. So let's go to this is the data port outputs for the CD. I'm really only interested in these two level controls. So I'm going to hold the shift key down and select both of those, and then right click and copy. Then go to the all speaker levels or my master and paste. Right click and say paste slaves. And it has now put the two channels in there that came from the left rack that I was interested in. It happens to be output gains 1 and 2. The little red X's that are there allow me to remove if I put too many channels on there, or I decide I don't need that channel in that particular collection. I can remove it. Let me go to the same thing for the data port out for the other two channels that I'm interested in, which are center right and far right. I'm going to right click those, copy, go back into the master window and paste those into there. And now I have set up master assignments. Now, by default, they are pasted in at whatever level the sliders were at the time that I pasted them. Since they were fully attenuated when I pasted them, that's the value that went in. But if I change these levels, I'm just going to arbitrarily pick some values. Remember, those channels are still muted in my design from before, so I'm not too worried about this. Notice the values: 17, minus 31, minus 16, minus 26. If we go back out here and look, minus 17, minus 31, and let me go look at the other ones, minus 16, minus 26. Let me bring this to a new horizontal group so we can see these side by side, and you will see how this looks then. So if I adjust my speaker levels now, you can see that I'm affecting them as a group. And you'll have to trust me, but it's also affecting the other two channels as well. I just don't have them all visible at one time. I can also make all of the slaves match whatever the master level is by right-clicking on the master level and say set slaves equal to master value. So if I do that, it'll probably give me a warning. You can turn this warning off so I don't see it in the future, but it'll say, are you sure you want to do this? I'm going to say yes. And now they have all jumped to minus 2.2. And let's just, for sake of argument, let's go look at the CD source data port output and slide down to those sliders as well. And sure enough, they're at minus 2.2. So moving my master level now, like so, they're all at 45.2. And sure enough, if we look at the other channels, everybody is at 45.2. You can see that for both outputs. Now, very, very useful tool. There's one critical element here, and that's that what happens if we change configs. If we jump to a different config with different settings, you might want these to stay at whatever value they are right now. And that would be interconfig output master. And that has some special rules about it. If we look at the help file, you could read more about this and specifics of what we're talking about. I highly recommend you do that. Interconfig output master. Very critical. Okay, So we've got our master created now, and we have, of course, we had some global presets earlier. Let's make our one final last global preset, and that's going to be all amps off. Again, you want to be descriptive in these. Whatever name you type for a global preset, that's the actual name that could appear on the LCD display of the individual basis units, so that they could access them from the LCD panel if they wanted to, or if you allowed that. Be short, but be descriptive if possible. Click on the next button. This one's going to, of course, talk to both of them. This is the one that's going to turn all the amps off. So it's going to affect both racks. And because we now have a master, we could select, if it made sense, it really doesn't in this example, but we could select one of the masters or the groups of masters and preset some level that we want that master to jump to when the global preset is fired off. Well, since this is going to turn the amps off, it really doesn't matter what I set this for. So I'm just going to deselect it. I don't care to jump to it. But that's what the master value would look like if you wanted to recall a master value at exactly the same time you recalled a global preset. So I'll just click on next and finish that one up. And now I have my global presets. You're also free to organize those and rearrange those in another window. There's got to be a way to do that. Renumber the selected global preset. Let's suppose I want that to be global preset number 2, so that 1 and 2 are next to each other, and then loud, medium, and lowest are the last 3, if I wanted to. So if I said renumber, and I said make it be number 2, it's going to warn me, hey, you've already got something there for number 2, you can't do it. We have to kind of do what's known as a bubble sort. We have to kind of give it a different number first. Say some unused number, let's say 6. Now it's number 6. If you were watching, I did have a very brief design rule check error, but that error corrected itself. It was due to duplicate global preset names. Now I'm going to start moving these other ones around. So I'm going to make number 4 become number 5. I'm going to make number 3 become number 4. And number 2 is going to become number 3. And that leaves me room for a number 2 again from this one here. And lo and behold, it's reshifted and moved all those around. So I'm not stuck to the order that I created them. I can go back and change the order if it makes sense to me. So there's my global presets and the masters. Now, we saw how masters work already. How about these global presets? Well, if I want to fire off a global preset, there's a window up here at the top, and I can say go to the amps off mode. And if I fire that off, it does go to amps off, but how do I know that? Well, if I go look at the panel, all the amp buttons are popped out, which means they're in standby or off for our practical purposes. Let's go to amps on, and you watch those buttons, and all those buttons have popped in. I can also fire it off directly from the list by just saying recall that particular globe, because I may have a whole list of them here. Recall that one, so let's go back to amps off. And as long as we're in here, let's go and check our loud, medium, and lowest level, which we should be talking to this block here. So if I say fire off the, well, it's already in loud mode. Let's instead go to medium. There it is. And medium has not touched the global preset for that was recalled to leave those amps off, because that was the last mode that I had gone in. If I switch to go to amps on turns all the amps on, but it has not touched this setting here because that wasn't included in the amps on snapshot or presets. So that's how global presets and snapshots work. And we'll see in a little bit how QSCreator, which will be used to build custom screens and panels, can be used to also fire off the global presets and the master controls so that you can hide all of the other stuff underneath the hood away from your end user so that they're not able to access functions or drill into things that they're not allowed to get into or they could get into trouble with. And in fact, you give them just simple controls on a panel. So that'll be the tutorial that will discuss QSCreator.